Welcome back, everybody. It's Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. Born on this date in 1898, inventor Waldo Simon of Demopolis. He worked for B.F. Goodrich Company and discovered a way to plasticize polyvinyl chloride. Now, what that means is that we owe him a great debt of gratitude every time we use PVC to conduct important functions. He worked with chemicals and plastics enough to hold dozens of patents, by the way, and live to be 100. In 1947, the PGA's Larry Nelson of Fort Payne. He won the PGA Championship in 81 and the U.S. Open in 83. In 1964, Pro Bowl defensive lineman Tim Harris. And in 1974, Basketball Hall of Famer Ben Wallace of Lowndes County. Today, let's talk about VA leadership. Nick Sabin back to D.C., an old church building coming down, West Nile virus, and I'm going to share some thoughts on vaping laws and cigarette nostalgia. That's really the best place for cigarettes, by the way, is in the past. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. Governor Kay Ivey said Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs Commissioner Kent Davis has agreed to resign at the end of the year, reports AL.com's Mike Kaysen. Davis has been the VA chief in Alabama since 2019. He's a retired Navy Rear Admiral. In a letter to Davis last week, Ivey called on him to step down. She cited the management of grant funds from ARPA and said delays put veteran service providers at risk of missing out on funds. She also referenced Davis's relationship with other agencies and cited the Mental Health Commissioner's cancellation of an agreement between the state VA and mental health to manage ARPA grants out of fear that mental health could face negative audit findings. According to media reports, last month Davis filed an ethics complaint against Mental Health Commissioner Kim Boswell that was dismissed by the Ethics Commission. Now, last week, Davis denied that ARPA grants were put in jeopardy and balked at Ivey's request for his resignation. But after meeting with the governor on Monday, he agreed to resign effective December 31st. ESPN analyst Nick Sabin, who recently also worked a stint as the University of Alabama's head football coach, bridging the Shula and DeBoer eras, will be in Washington, D.C. on Thursday to lead a panel discussion on name, image, and likeness rules, reports AL.com's Joseph D. Bryant. Congresswoman Terry Sewell, a Birmingham Democrat, organized the panel as part of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference. It's not a new topic for Sabin, of course, and it's not a new topic for Sabin on Capitol Hill. In March, he told a panel presented by Senator Ted Cruz, a Texas Republican, that the new rules allowing players to make NIL money actually contributed to his decision to retire from coaching. Right now, states make the NIL rules for their colleges and universities. Sewell said that's led to a wild, wild west situation and that federal intervention is needed to set some standards. Demolition has begun on a church building that has stood in Mountain Brook for just over 70 years, reports AL.com's Greg Garrison. Shades Valley Presbyterian Church was built in 1953. Sunday attendance had fallen to around 75 to 80 by the time the church stopped holding services in the building a couple years ago. Southminster Presbyterian Church in Vestavia Hills absorbed the Shades Valley congregation. Now, the property, which is on Montevallo Road in Mountain Brook, will be developed into 14 home sites. 5 Presbyterian churches in the Birmingham area have shut down over the past 5 years. 2 cases of West Nile virus have been reported in Mobile County, reports AL.com's John Sharp. They're the first 2 human cases this year, and it's a signal for folks, if you aren't already, to put extra effort into not being bitten by the South's unofficial regional bird of prey, the mosquito. That means using skeeter spray that's 25% DEET. And get on the youngins about leaving the door open. That lets the air conditioner out and the skeeter in. Youngins are like cats. They can't decide whether they want to be in or out. Also, if you've been lucky enough to get rain recently, then now's a great time to make sure you don't have standing water around the house, especially those old tires stacked up behind the shed. Stacks of old tires may look great, but they're bad about collecting rainwater. Hey, let's take a quick ad break, and then I'll share some thoughts on smoking and vaping. Not that I'm an expert on either. Thank y'all for staying with us. Now, last week we mentioned a proposed statewide ban on vaping in public places. State Senator Gerald Allen, a Tuscaloosa Republican, is behind a measure that would add vaping, e-cigarettes, etc. to the public smoking ban that's already in place, the Alabama Indoor Clean Air Act. The proposal didn't get much traction during the last legislative session, but Allen hopes it might next spring. Earlier this year, it may have stalled out more because of its timing and other priorities than because of any major opposition. But we shall see. If I were a betting man, and legally allowed to place a bet, I'd bet on Allen's anti-vaping effort to work this time around. We have a fairly easy time throwing popular support behind curbing ways that other people enjoy themselves, for better or worse. Nicotine, marijuana, alcohol, guns, hunting, SUVs, most things we either use or we disapprove of. Vaping has been popular for over a decade, but hasn't become part of our broader culture across generations. Those who vape, in many cases, are quite young or are using it in an effort to kick cigarettes. So either they don't have a strong lobby or can appreciate the health concerns by the anti-vaping legislation. Still, Forbes ranks Alabama 6th for vape use. And the vape lobby is going to lean on the CDC figures that show we still have an unusually high cigarette smoking rate and argue that those smokers need a substitute. Meanwhile, AL.com's John Sharp reported that according to the Mobile-based Drug Education Council, there's already mounting evidence about the negative health effects of secondhand vape. Alabama's Clean Indoor Air Act became law in 2003, and municipalities have supplemented state laws with ordinances banning smoking in more places. As recently as 2019, Birmingham established its health district with virtually no smoking at all in an area of town near UAB, and Gulf Shores became the first city in Alabama to ban smoking on the beach. So it's taken a little over a decade to make a serious effort at nipping e-cigarettes in the bud, but it took more than 130 years to put out cigarettes in public places. That's because it's our vice. Actually, if you're too young to remember the Nixon administration, it's more our parents' and grandparents' vice. People my age and younger have no real excuse because we absolutely knew what smoking could do to us. We can't blame Philip Morris, the Marlboro Man, or Don Draper. It's a different story for anyone born before, say, 1970. I'm not sure how any of y'all didn't smoke. Even though I've never smoked and never lived with smokers, I can appreciate the grip that it had because it holds a strange, nostalgic place in my mind, or maybe nose. If you weren't there in the 1970s or 80s, you can't understand how I can say that about something that's caused or contributed to tragedy in so many people's families. Even if nobody smoked in your home, you probably had ashtrays on most surfaces in case you had company. It was entirely socially acceptable to walk into somebody's house and fire up a Winston. And we wonder why most people don't answer their doorbells today. My folks didn't smoke. That helped me avoid it. But it also means that I associate the smell of a cigarette with fun things. County fairs, peanut, possum, and Indian summer seafood festivals. Fishing with grandma. Nobody could work 3 cane poles and a carton of Salem's like my grandma. The ballpark. Youth baseball coaches back then would pull a fungo bat out of a Vietnam-era duffel bag, light up a heater, and hit a round of infield before the first ash fell off. The kids back then were pretty much limited to smokeless tobacco products. And hotels. Where I'm from, travel vacations were rare, and they were always to Atlanta during baseball season. But somebody else's cigarette smoke wafting up out of the carpet smelled like you'd been places. Even as steeped in smoke culture as we were, we've managed to largely clean it up since Y2K. That suggests to me that these much, much newer products, less familiar and likely not much healthier, don't stand much of a chance. Thanks for indulging us. We will be back here again tomorrow. Until then, come on by and see what we're doing on the internet anytime you want to at al.com.